There is a hotel inside each of us, a sprawling, labyrinthine place with long corridors, doors that never quite close, and rooms we don't dare enter. Some of these rooms glow with warmth and memory. Others are locked and humming with shadows, waiting for the moment we lose control of the key. We carry this hotel everywhere we go, into our relationships, our failures, our victories, and our silence. And yet, most of us wander its halls pretending the walls are blank and the doors sealed. But deep down, we know every locked room is still alive, and every silence conceals a scream. Stephen King once said that monsters are real, and ghosts are real too. They live inside us, and sometimes they win, in The Shining. The Overlook Hotel is more than just a building. It is the mind itself, rotting and echoing, reflecting everything a man tries to bury. Jack Torrance didn't simply battle alcoholism, anger, or failure. He battled the rooms within his own head, each one whispering a truth he could not bear. And when he entered them, whether willingly or dragged by circumstance, the walls devoured him whole. But isn't that the truth for all of us? The hotel of the mind does not burn down when we ignore it. It waits, patient, relentless, and the longer we deny it, the more we risk becoming permanent residents. Fear is often the first room we stumble into. It wears no disguise. It's the cold hallway at 3 a.m, the familiar creak of a stair when you're sure you're alone, the call from the doctor before you even pick up the phone. Fear is primal, but it is also clever. It teaches us how small we are, how easily undone by the simplest things. And yet, fear is not the enemy. It's the guide. It shows us where we are weakest, which door we're too afraid to open, which memory we've locked behind wood and steel. But if we never walk into that room, fear becomes more than a shadow. It becomes the architect of the hotel itself, adding wings and corridors we cannot navigate. A life ruled by fear is a life built entirely of closed doors. Then there is failure, the room most of us pretend doesn't exist. Failure is not filled with monsters or phantoms, but mirrors. Harsh, cracked, and merciless mirrors that reflect back every choice we regret, every opportunity we let slip. Some people spend their whole lives staring into those mirrors, replaying a single moment until it eats them alive. Others turn their heads and pretend they see nothing at all. But failure does not vanish when ignored. It waits for the silence between words, for the quiet moments before sleep, when your defenses are thin, and then it whispers, "You could have been more. You should have been more." Jack Torrance's true horror wasn't that he lost his job, his chance, his pride. It was that he believed those failures defined him. The hotel didn't create his downfall. It simply handed him the key to the room where his failures were already rotting. Human morality. What a fragile floor this hotel rests upon. We tell ourselves we are good people, that we would never cross certain lines, that the darkness belongs to others. But morality bends like old wood beneath the weight of hunger, shame, or desperation. Give a man enough pressure, and he will surprise even himself. He will walk into a room he once swore was forbidden, and he will stay there longer than he planned. The question is never whether the room exists. It is whether you have the courage to admit you are capable of opening the door. That is why King's horror feels so suffocating, because it is not about vampires, or haunted hotels, or blood on the carpet. It is about you, about me, about the fragile scaffolding of morality that collapses when the wind howls too hard. And yet, within this hotel of the mind, there are also rooms of understanding, rooms that do not punish, but reveal. They remind us that every person we pass carries their own hallways, their own doors, their own silence. When we judge too quickly, we forget that the stranger next to us may be battling the same locked rooms we run from. Compassion is not born from pity. It is born from recognition. Recognition that we are all haunted, that we all bleed in secret. When Jack loses himself to rage, when his family trembles in the cold halls of the Overlook, it is not just their story. It is every story of a father too broken to hold his child with steady hands, of a mother too paralyzed by fear to leave, of a son too young to understand why love can transform into terror. Compassion demands we acknowledge that the hotel is never empty. It is always occupied by someone else's ghosts, too. Still, the struggle within never ceases. Emotional turmoil does not knock politely. It storms in, shattering windows, flooding the rooms, anger, shame, regret, longing, each emotion a tenant refusing to leave. And the hardest part of this struggle is not fighting the storm, but admitting it exists. We live in a world that rewards masks, that applauds the ability to smile while drowning. But the hotel remembers. The hotel keeps score. Every mask becomes another locked door. Another room we'll eventually have to enter when the silence grows too loud. The question then is not how to escape the hotel, because escape is impossible. No one leaves. The question is, how do you live inside it without becoming its prisoner? How do you face the rooms without being consumed? Perhaps the lesson is this: to carry the key not as a weapon, but as a choice, to walk into fear and failure not as punishments, but as teachers, to admit that morality is fragile, but fragility does not equal doom, to see compassion not as weakness, but as the only map through the corridors of human cruelty. Because the truth is brutal. There are no empty rooms in the hotel of the mind. Every door leads somewhere, and every corridor waits for your footsteps. The rooms you avoid will not forget you. They will wait, and when the time comes, when you are too tired to run, they will open themselves, and you will have to look, you will have to see, you will have to know. So the question, whispered through the endless halls of your own mind, is not whether the hotel exists. It does. The question is, when the door opens, will you step inside with trembling hands, or will you let the silence devour you? There is a strange thing about silence. It never stays empty. Silence fills itself with echoes, with footsteps that aren't there, with thoughts you thought you buried years ago. In the hotel of the mind, silence is not peace, it is pressure. It is the sound of blood in your ears when you lie awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, knowing that the past is walking the halls again. You tell yourself it's nothing. You roll over, but the silence doesn't stop. It becomes a voice, and that voice knows your name. Jack Torrance's silence was not quiet. It was deafening. A man with a temper he swore he could master. A father promising he'd never raise his hand again. A writer convincing himself the words would return if he could just find the right place, the right job, the right peace. But silence mocked him. It replayed his failures like old film reels. It whispered that his wife doubted him, that his son feared him, that the world outside had already judged him and found him wanting. And when silence becomes accusation, it is only a matter of time before you fight back, not against the world, but against yourself. That is how mistakes are born, not in loud, violent bursts, but in quiet moments when the mind turns inward and decides it cannot bear the weight anymore. Mistakes are not accidents, they are bargains. A man bargains with his fear, with his pride, with his pain. He tells himself, just this once, just a little. No one will know. No one will be hurt. And yet the hotel records everything. Every bargain is another signature in its guest book. Every mistake another room added to its structure. We think mistakes fade with time, but in truth, they only take on new wallpaper, new furniture, new shadows. You can walk past them for years, but eventually, the door will swing open and you'll see the chair still waiting for you. The criminal psychology of making a mistake is this. The crime begins long before the act itself. It begins with self-deception. A man convinces himself he is owed, that his anger is justified, that his cruelty is not cruelty at all, but necessity. He builds a story in which he is the victim, even as he sharpens the knife. That is why King's villains never feel like monsters. They feel like neighbors, like family, like us. Because the crime isn't born from some alien evil. It is born from the same rooms we all carry. The ones where we replay old humiliations, where we chew on shame until it turns sour, where we convince ourselves we deserve to strike back. But here is the truth few want to face. Once you make the mistake, once you commit the act, once you step into that forbidden room, you do not leave unchanged. Something follows you back into the hallway. It lingers. You can scrub your hands until they bleed, but the stain is not on your skin. It is in the fibers of the hotel itself. Guilt is not a single room. It is mold, spreading, seeping into the walls, the floorboards, the ceilings, and no matter how many lights you turn on, the smell of it never leaves. And yet, what do? We repeat the cycle. We know the door leads somewhere dark, and still, we reach for the handle. Why? Because the human heart is stubborn. Because pride is louder than wisdom. Because anger is easier than sorrow. Because to admit weakness is to admit the hotel owns us. And no one wants to believe they are a tenant in their own prison. So we step into the same rooms over and over again, telling ourselves this time will be different. But it never is. The wallpaper may change, the shadows may move, but the room is the same, and it always knows your name. And here lies the cruelest part. The rooms you avoid do not only shape your life, they shape the lives of everyone who loves you. Your silence teaches your child what love feels like, uncertain, trembling, afraid. Your anger convinces your partner that compassion is a dangerous gamble. Your failures spill over like water, flooding the people who never asked to drown. The hotel is not private. Its walls leak. Its rooms echo beyond your skull. Jack's descent was not his alone. It dragged his wife and son into the abyss with him. That is the reality of every mistake, every silence, every door flung open. Someone else pays the price for the room you chose to enter. But if the hotel is inescapable, if fear and failure and silence are permanent tenants, then what hope is there? The hope lies in how you carry the key. The key is choice, and choice is all we ever have. You cannot demolish the rooms. You cannot erase them, but you can decide when to face them. You can walk into failure and sit with it, not as an executioner, but as a teacher. You can enter fear and feel its weight without letting it dictate your path. You can unlock compassion, not only for others, but for yourself. Because here is the irony. Most people rot in their hotels not because they are too weak, but because they believe they must face every room alone. The truth is, some doors require more than one set of hands to open. Some shadows shrink only when another voice says, "I see you. I understand." The greatest lie the hotel tells is that you are its only guest. But the corridors are crowded, the walls are thin, and if you listen closely, you can hear footsteps, breathing, the sound of someone else fumbling with their keys just like you. That recognition, that shared humanity, is not an escape, but it is survival. Still, survival is not guaranteed, because for every person who chooses to face the rooms, there are others who let the silence devour them, and once silence consumes you, it is not just your story that ends, it is every story connected to yours. That is why the hotel is the perfect metaphor for human existence. You are never as alone as you think, and never as innocent as you claim. The rooms you enter echo through others, and the rooms you avoid leave others in the dark. So the question is not whether you will make mistakes. You will. The question is not whether you will feel fear. You will. The question is not whether you will fail. You will. The question is, when the hotel of your mind opens the next door, will you face what waits inside? Or will you keep walking, pretending the silence is not following you? Some doors are heavier than others. Some doors you press your hand against and feel the resistance of your entire history pushing back. These are the rooms of shame. They smell of stale air and wasted time, lined with old photographs that twist into accusations the longer you look. Shame is not just memory, it is theater. It takes the smallest stumble and projects it onto the walls like a grand failure, replayed until you can't remember the truth anymore. And what makes shame unbearable is that it doesn't whisper, it shouts in silence. It tells you that everyone can see what you've hidden, that every eye on you is an indictment, that every kindness is just a mask concealing mockery. Shame convinces you that you deserve the hotel's punishment, that your sentence is permanent residency in its darkest wing. This is why people destroy themselves. Not because they cannot endure pain, but because they cannot endure the thought of being seen as weak. They would rather break their bodies, scorch their lives, or shatter their families than let someone else glimpse the weight they carry. Jack Torrance could have asked for help. He could have admitted he was drowning. But shame twisted his pride into a weapon. Better to fight. Better to dominate, better to rage, anything but vulnerability. That is the cruel paradox. Shame builds its own walls, and then convinces you that you are safer trapped inside than walking free. But the rooms of shame have another layer. They hold not only your mistakes, but the mistakes inflicted on you, the cruelties others carved into your skin, the betrayals you never saw coming, the abuse you didn't deserve. Shame is cunning. It convinces victims to carry the burden of their abuser, to hold the guilt that was never theirs. And so the hotel grows heavier, more suffocating. Innocence becomes infected by someone else's darkness, and yet it still echoes with your name. This is why compassion matters, not because it erases the past, but because it can remind you that some rooms were never yours to own in the first place. Then there is rage. Rage is a furnace room, the kind you know better than to enter, but the heat still leaks into the hallway. Rage burns differently than fear or shame. It promises power. It convinces you that if you just give in, if you just swing harder, scream louder, destroy faster, you will finally feel alive. Rage is seductive because it feels like control. And yet rage is always the room that burns the whole hotel down. It is not precise. It is not merciful. It does not care if the walls collapse on you and everyone you love. Jack's rage was not his weapon. It was his noose. And how many times in our lives do we confuse those two? How many times do we believe our fury will save us, when in truth, it is tightening the knot around our own necks? The psychology of rage is this: it blinds you to corridors that might have saved you. While you are consumed by heat, you cannot see the door marked forgiveness or the stairway marked escape. Rage narrows your vision until the only thing left is the fire itself. And when the fire fades, all that remains is ash. That is why we regret rage more than almost anything else, because its aftermath reveals how much we destroyed to feed it. Yet, even in the ashes, there are lessons. This is the paradox of the hotel of the mind. It is both prison and school. Every room teaches. If you are willing to listen, fear teaches humility. Failure teaches resilience. Shame teaches the cost of silence. Rage teaches the fragility of control. But you must be willing to see the lesson, not just the punishment. Jack Torrance never saw the lesson. He only saw the condemnation. He mistook the hotel for his executioner, when in truth, it was only his reflection, and here lies the final cruelty. The hotel does not vanish when you die. Its architecture passes on. Children inherit rooms built from their parents' silence, their parents' rage, their parents' shame. Trauma leaks into bloodlines, turning the hallways into mazes long before a child has even held a key. Danny Torrance inherited Jack's hotel, not by choice, but by birthright. And isn't that true for all of us? We walk into rooms we never built. We hear echoes of mistakes we never made. The hotel is both personal and ancestral, a structure that outlives its builders. So what do we do with this inheritance? Do we repeat the same mistakes, relive the same failures, ignite the same fires? Or do we stop in the corridor, hold the key in our hand, and decide to open the door differently this time? That is the real question, the one Stephen King forces us to face when we close his books and stare at the ceiling in the dark. The horror is never only in the ghosts. It is in the choices we make after seeing them. And maybe that is the only way out. Not escape, but confrontation. Not demolition, but acknowledgement. To turn the key slowly, open the door wide, and let the light spill into rooms we swore we'd never enter. To say, yes, this is my fear. Yes, this is my shame. Yes, this is my rage. But they do not own me. They are tenants, not masters, because the hotel of the mind will never vanish. The question is whether you wander its halls blindly, or whether you carry your key with intention. So when the silence comes again, and it will, when the hallways lengthen and the shadows lean close, remember this: the hotel cannot be escaped, but it can be understood. And sometimes, understanding is the only form of freedom we get. Tell me, when you hear the footsteps behind your own silence, when you feel the handle of the next door turning, will you open it and face what waits inside? Or will you keep walking until the hotel swallows you whole? Some rooms are not built by fear, failure, or rage. They are built by longing. Longing is a softer room, at least at first glance. It smells of dust and old paper, of photographs curling at the edges, of letters never sent. It is the room you slip into when you are tired of fighting, when you want to believe there is a version of life you missed, a path where everything turned out right. But longing is not gentle. It is a trap disguised as comfort. You sit in the chair, look out the window at what could have been, and time slips away. You forget the corridors waiting beyond the door. You forget the life still burning outside. Longing convinces you that you were cheated, that the best of you belongs to a past you can never touch. Jack Torrance longed for redemption, for the chance to prove he was more than his failures, more than his temper, more than the man everyone doubted. And that longing made him fragile. The hotel knew exactly where to press, what illusions to offer, what promises to whisper. That is the danger of longing. It makes you easy prey when you ache deeply enough for something. You will ignore the rot under the wallpaper, the blood on the carpet, the knife in the dark. You will convince yourself the illusion is worth the price, but the bill always comes due. If longing is the softest room, despair is the deepest. Despair is a basement that smells of damp stone and rusted iron. It has no windows, no clocks, no exits. In despair, time does not move, it folds. You can spend hours there or years, and it feels the same. Despair is not fire like rage, not noise like shame. It is weight, heavy, crushing, endless weight. It convinces you there is no key, no door, no hotel at all, just stone pressing in until you vanish. And yet despair is the most honest of all the rooms, because it does not lie. It tells you the truth, that life can hurt beyond measure, that hope is fragile, that the hotel has no final exit. What despair hides, though, is that weight can be carried, not alone, not easily, but carried. And carrying is sometimes enough. When Stephen King wrote The Shining, he wasn't just writing about a haunted hotel. He was writing about what happens when a man cannot bear his own rooms. Jack Torrance's story is not about monsters hiding in corridors. It is about what happens when you turn every handle alone, when you believe silence is safer than confession, when you mistake rage for control and longing for salvation. The Overlook Hotel is unforgettable because it is familiar. Every reader knows its halls because every reader walks them, night after night, behind their own eyes. But here is the part most miss. The hotel also contains rooms of grace. They are small, often hidden, easy to overlook, but they are there. A room where forgiveness sits quietly in a chair, waiting for you to notice it. A room where a hand is held out in compassion, if only you have the courage to reach back. A room where love, fragile and trembling, still glows even after the storms. These rooms are not easy to find, because pain echoes louder than kindness. But they exist, and when you find them, even for a moment, the entire architecture of the hotel changes. The corridors are still long, the shadows still deep, but you are no longer only a prisoner, you are also a witness. And maybe that is the purpose of the Hotel of the Mind, not to break you, but to teach you, to show you that you are both the architect and the tenant, that you carry fear and failure, shame and rage, longing and despair, but you also carry grace, that the rooms you avoid will always wait, but the rooms you cherish can be returned to, again and again, like a lamp in the dark. The real terror is not that the hotel exists, It is that most of us will walk its halls pretending we are somewhere else, pretending the silence is not a voice, the door not a choice, the shadows not alive, but denial only feeds the structure. The longer you refuse to see, the larger the hotel grows. Until one day, you wake up, and the corridors stretch forever. And you realize you are no longer wandering. You are lost. And so the question becomes sharper, more urgent. What will you do when the hotel offers you the next door? Will you enter with courage, even if your hands shake? Will you admit that the room of fear has something to teach you? That the room of shame is not a life sentence? That the room of rage is not power, but fire? Will you search for the smaller rooms, the hidden ones, where forgiveness and love still breathe? Or will you keep walking, keep pretending, until the silence devours you entirely? The hotel is patient. It has no end, no beginning. It was there before you were born, and it will outlast you. But within its endless halls lies your one undeniable power, the choice of how to walk. You may walk in fear, or you may walk in compassion. You may carry your key like a weapon, or like a light. You may lock yourself away, or you may open the door and face what waits inside. So I leave you here, in your own corridor, hand on your own handle, listening to the silence pressing close. The hotel is real. The rooms are waiting, and the only question that matters, the only one that has ever mattered, is this. When the next door creaks open in the hotel of your mind, will you enter? Or will you let the darkness choose for you?